Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I do contribute this to all the kind of media that mindfulness has gotten in the last few months, in the last year. More people want to know about it, so I'm so happy to see you all here. I also want to thank Joe. Thank you for having me. And the Center and St. Paul's. It's a pleasure to be here and a pleasure to be able to talk. I always feel fortunate to be able to share what I know and to be able to teach what I teach, because it has so helped me in my life. Both being a parent, where it has helped me the most, in my work, and everywhere else in my life. So I really do feel fortunate to be able to bring this to you guys, and hopefully you will take something away that will be helpful for you in your everyday lives. So a little bit about me first, a little background. I found mindfulness through, I am a counselor. I work with kids, and I've worked with kids and families for the last 14 years. So I'm going to correct Joe a little bit. I haven't been teaching mindfulness for 14 years, but I have been teaching and helping kids and families in my counseling career for the last 14 years. I found mindfulness after studying at the Family Play Therapy Center, if anyone knows of that, in Mount Airy. They train in a mindfulness-based play therapy program. And that's where I was exposed to mindfulness at first. So I used it in my work with juvenile delinquents. I worked with that population and autistic kids right after I had my first child in 2001. I went back for my master's in counseling psych after 10 years of being in sales and having Sunday night dreads. Knowing that, oh God, I have to go up and sell toilet paper to hotels, tissues, soaps, and I was selling down in Atlantic City. And I'll also share with you that I was, within the last few years, diagnosed with ADD inattentive type after my daughter was diagnosed. And so I would be in Atlantic City, and I'd be getting calls from the manager saying, we don't have our toilet paper. We don't have this. And that was the beginning of me realizing that this forgetfulness and this inattentiveness has a name. And I would be running to the distributor, picking up toilet paper in Norristown and driving it down to Atlantic City, case by case, in my car. So that career did not work out for me. I was successful in it, but it created so much stress that those Sundays were just terrible. So I went back to school and went for counseling psych. And this had been my calling probably from an early age, when I grew up in a family that was, I guess you would say, dysfunctional. There's one of my close family friends back there laughing. There was fighting, there was yelling, which was like the normal way of communicating. But there was also a lot of love. So I was fortunate to have that. At an early age, at 14, my mother passed away. And it was as if she disappeared. She, I still well up. It was as if no one could deal with it. So it was better to just forget her and to not talk about it than to feel the pain. So that brings me to 20 years later, when I go and go back for school for counseling, because I decided that I wanted to be able to help kids and families who are in that situation, and to be able to let them know that there is somewhere to go, there is someone to talk to. So that got me into counseling. And then I had my first child. And then a whole other kind of emotion came over me. The fear of, am I doing things right? The history and the conditioning that I had that was so strong. and not necessarily the best parenting, but knowing that there was such love behind it. So I was fortunate enough to find mindfulness. And I found it because I was completely overwhelmed in parenting. I had 3 children in 3 years. So I had my oldest was 3 years and 1 month when I had my youngest. So I had 3 in diapers, and it was just kind of mayhem, like a controlled chaos, though. And I was, happy for the most part. I thought I was doing a good job. I was able to take care of the daily things very well because I love the nurturing part of it. I loved just the taking care of. I loved the nursing. I loved all of that. But then when they started to talk and have attitude, I wasn't prepared for that. I wasn't prepared. And I reverted back to everything that I learned. And what I learned was not helpful at all. So I then started trying to learn more about mindfulness for myself. So I was bringing it to my clients in a way where I was working with them in a way where I was very centered on them. Mindfulness-based play therapy, whatever they did, I was one-on-one with them and staying in the moment. So then I had to bring it into my own life. And it wasn't so pretty. It wasn't so easy. What I realized is that there was so much emotion behind every kind of reaction that I had. And beginning to realize where that came from was hard. And it is still something that I'm working on every day. Because now I'm able to manage the emotion part and I'm able to keep it in check probably 90% of the time. But there are still times where, I'm able to keep it in check in the moment and with the kids, but then there's still that underlying feeling in my chest and my heart that says, I feel resentful, that they shouldn't be acting this way, and that things should be different. And that's a big part of mindfulness that I'll talk to you about. Mindfulness has helped me with that, with managing my emotions, which has really benefited my whole family. It has helped me with being more present with my clients. It has helped me with my own self-confidence and my own beliefs in myself. I told a story which Joe appreciated. I really think the only reason I had the courage to go for this gray silver hair was because of mindfulness. Everybody I asked when I said I wanted to stop coloring my hair, no, you can't do it. You can't do it. You'll look 10 years older. So I believed it for a while, and then finally last year I said, all right, I'm not coloring my hair anymore. I'm done. And I did it. And it was freeing. It was liberating. It was like a freedom I had never had before. Not looking into the mirror and seeing that skunk stripe down. So I really do. I attribute that to my practice and to becoming more mindful. So that is my story in a nutshell. As Joe said, I do. My passion is teaching this in schools because I really do believe that this is a skill that can be taught. You can teach kids how to pay attention. You don't have to just tell them pay attention. There is a skill behind it. And it also is the basis for learning. You cannot learn academically if you don't have a basis for social emotional learning. And this really can be. There are other great ones out there too, but this really is the one that puts it in an introspective way for the children. Not just talking about these are the emotions, but allowing them to be introspective about them and to discovering insight and wisdom versus just giving them knowledge and fact. We want to give them wisdom, and that's what this does. Okay, so just a raise of hands. Who in here has experience with mindfulness or meditation? Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so today, for those people who don't, I'm going to give you the basis of what it is and just a kind of an introduction. And for everyone else, I want you to use your beginner's mind and look at this as if you've never heard it before, and you never know what you might find in there, what piece of little knowledge that or insight that might cling for today. So mindfulness, in definition, is the ability to be present in the moment. Right now. Here's where we are. We're in this beautiful chapel. Without judgment and with kindness. The hard part, I think all of it is hard actually, but for us the hard part is the without judgment. We are in a constant stream of judging, whether something is good or bad. Any, situation that we're in, we're judging, do I like this? Do I not like it? And if we like it, we might hang on to it for a little bit. If we don't like it, we completely dismiss it right away. So, beginning to become aware of the present moment. The present moment is the only moment we really have. It's the here and now. If you're thinking about what already happened, you're in the past. If you're thinking about what happened yesterday, if you're thinking about what happened 10 minutes ago, you're not in the present, you're in the past. And usually what those thoughts bring are sadness and anger. It's usually about something that you didn't do well or someone else didn't do. And they keep us in this pattern of thinking, of negative thinking. If you are thinking about what's going to happen, what you need to do, or what is going to happen in the next hour or the next day, the next week, you're in the future. And usually that brings worry. The only place where you can be truly content is in the present. Another kind of pet peeve of mine, and it just comes up, is when I hear parents say, what do you want for your child? And they say, I just want them to be happy. And for me, happiness isn't a goal. The goal for me, and what I try and teach kids and parents who come to see me, is that the goal is to be able to create an inner peace. An inner peace that can handle the struggles when they come, because there are going to be struggles. They're part of life. And then on the other side of that, to be able to hold on to the good times when they come, and to acknowledge them, and to give them time and awareness, the time that they deserve. But to just wish for happiness it's just not true. It's not what life is. Life is to be able to handle the ups and downs. There are always going to be struggles. But we so tend to push those away and to not bring them into our awareness and accept them. We just want to cling to the positive. So that is not what mindfulness is about. Mindfulness is about being able to be present with whatever comes. Good, bad, or ugly. And they like to say that you can begin to look at things as unpleasant or pleasant. You don't need to classify things as good or bad, but as unpleasant and pleasant. It takes away that charge that often gives us that emotional, kind of awareness that, ooh, I'm not liking this, where the judging begins. So then going back to the kindness. So being able to look at yourself and experience yourself and others with kindness. Kind of taming that judging mind. So let's do right now just one practice. Okay, we'll begin by just sitting where we are. Get in a comfortable I'm going to ring the bell. And I just want you to listen to the bell for the entire time. Okay? And if you want to, raise your hand when you no longer hear it. Yeah, so I see there are definitely some keen senses of hearing here. It resonates for a while. You can hear the bell. This is the bell that I use in the classroom with the kids. And this is the way I introduce mindfulness to them, with this bell and listening. So how often during a day do you just allow yourself to listen? To just hear sound? To hear what's going on around you. That's present moment awareness. So now let's try it again. And this time, I'm not going to ring the bell, but I want you to just for 1 minute, let your eyes close. And listen to the sounds around you. Starting now. If you're comfortable, let your eyes close. If not, look down at your lap. Open your eyes. So just beginning, when you really tune in and practice focused awareness, what can you hear? Anybody want to share what they heard? Yeah. You heard yourself breathing. Amazing. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, like you can hear people rustling, right? You hear movement. You hear all different kinds of things that if you weren't paying attention, you wouldn't hear. So just beginning to look at that in your everyday lives. How many things, because we really don't pay attention, do we not really experience? Many. So thinking about that. How often are we not in the present moment? A lot of the time. And that's kind of what we call autopilot. So if you think of autopilot, how often are you in autopilot? Autopilot for me, it always seems to be most poignant when I'm driving. Last year I worked at a Catholic school in Bristol a few days a week. And I would take this trip down the turnpike. And I can't tell you how many times I just drove right by Fort Washington exit where I was supposed to be getting off. And I wouldn't be on the phone. It was just my mind busy thinking. And just beginning to realize that, how often we are so distracted. How often our mind is doing 10 different things, going from one thing to the next. How often you're talking to someone and you're really only half listening. You know, you're doing something, you're looking at your screen. This is one that I try and practice at home with my kids. You know, they will come up and ask me something while I'm on the computer. And being able to actually look at them, to see their face when they ask me something, and not just respond and not look up. Just becoming aware of that and what we do and how we can become more present and begin to notice our autopilots. So a few more examples of autopilot. If you tend to break or spill things a lot, you knock things over. That's some kind of a signal that you're in autopilot. Rushing through things. So you may either it can be eating, like you rush through dinner, or you're a fast eater and you don't even really remember eating. Like you look down and there's no more rice on your plate. Like, oh God, did I eat that? Just becoming aware of the present moment. Another one, which is one for me, losing my cell phone. I can place that somewhere without even paying attention, no attention at all. And within a second, I can't remember where I put it. It's just there's no awareness there. That is my practice now, is becoming aware. I'm doing really good on the emotion part. Now it's just becoming aware of my, physicality, where I'm putting things and organizing myself. It's another way that mindfulness is helpful. So I don't know if you guys can see this little cartoon here. It says mindful with an F-U-L-L on this side. Mindful on this side. So this is us in our daily lives. We're like this. We have so many distractions. This one is just the view. Exactly what he's looking at. You know? Being in the moment instead of having all this other clutter in our head. So I wanted to give you a little intro to the brain science behind this, because that is really what excites me and what keeps me going. I have this little model, and it may be hard for you guys to see in the back, but you can feel free to come back after it's over and come up and look at the model so that you can see. But this is our brain, okay? And mindfulness is teaching us to stay in the moment. However, lots of the time we are not in the moment, and we are practicing in here. So if everyone can see, this is the most primitive part of the brain, and this is the amygdala. Okay? And when I teach kids, I call it the reptile brain, because this is the same part of the brain that we share with reptiles. So it does the same thing. So it keeps us safe. That's what it does. Fight or flight mode. So when we are in physical danger, actual physical danger where someone or something is hurting us, this part of the brain is exactly where we need to be, what we need to use. It sends adrenaline and oxytocin to our brain to put it into that fight or flight mode so that we can make good decisions accordingly. You know, we know what to do just physically. It's not even a decision. It's just we just do it. That's what our brain knows to do when this gets activated. However, the brain does not know the difference between physical harm and emotional harm. It acts the same way. So when someone, for instance, as a parent, doesn't do what you want them to do, we go into this part of the brain, and it puts us into fight or flight mode. When there is a similar traumatic event, like if something had happened to a person in an accident, that's how kind of post-traumatic stress things happen. This blue part is the hippocampus. This stores memories, and it's not by chance that it is attached to the amygdala and in the limbic system. When we have these memories, even though they may not be conscious, they trigger that fight or flight response, and we go right into fight or flight mode. Just because someone said something or did something that could be similar to what you experienced in the past. So this is when I was parenting, this is where I was, in this part of the brain. I found it really hard to get out of that when my kids were not doing what I asked them to do, or when they were temper tantruming, or when they were just not cooperating, because that wasn't what I was taught. I wasn't taught how to handle them. I wasn't given the tools. So when you go into fight or flight mode, a filter almost goes across the brain, goes across this part to allow communication to stay in the amygdala and to keep you in that safe mode. So it doesn't allow, this is the prefrontal cortex. This is the part that evolves as we grow and doesn't fully evolve, if we're lucky, until age 25 or 26. But even if you think about it, in a lot of people we know it's not fully evolved, right? Forever. But mindfulness is what helps build this part of the brain and helps create neural circuitry in this part of the brain that then allows us to be able to not get shut down when emotions are present, to not get hijacked by our emotions, because we can then activate this part by doing something as simple as breathing. Because when we take slow, deep breaths, we bring dopamine and serotonin to our brain. Versus taking those breaths when we're angry, that are all inhale, which then bring the adrenaline and oxytocin. The exhale is the part that brings the dopamine and serotonin to the brain. And in many, 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 many research studies have been shown to activate the prefrontal cortex. So when we do that, when we practice mindfulness, this part of the brain actually changes. The whole brain changes. The gray matter associated with learning, memory, and empathy is what increases when we practice mindfulness. And what decreases is the part associated with anxiety and stress. So it really, really is science. It's amazing. So that's why I love teaching the kids about the brain, too. Because it's so simple. To be able to explain that to them in a way where you're saying, mammal brain, reptile brain, and they get it. And then just to be able, in my office, I also teach kids, and I teach classes for adults. And I love to hear when the kids come in and say, oh yeah, mom was in her reptile brain. She could not get out. I told her to breathe, and she couldn't. And that's the way it is. But I love that awareness. They're learning, they're getting it. So to be able to teach that first to ourselves, and then if you are in, the years of your life where you are raising your kids, or even maybe being with your grandchildren, although that seems much less stressful. being able to practice that and to bring that to them too. Because I do believe too that the best way for them to learn is by our modeling. Okay. So the history of mindfulness. Of course, it has its roots in different traditions, Buddhism, thousands of years ago. But as far as mindfulness-based stress reduction and being brought to the United States, about 30 years ago, maybe even more now, Jon Kabat-Zinn, who, if you're interested in learning more about mindfulness, he is really the king of kind of American mindfulness-based stress reduction, which he brought to hospitals in Massachusetts and was using it as a way to manage pain with cancer patients. So this is kind of how all this bloomed into where it is today. He really did bring it here and give it that kind of awareness without tying in the Buddhist, just for what it is, the science behind it. It is now used all over. Has anyone not seen mindfulness in the media? Yeah, I mean, it is everywhere. Everywhere you look. It's been on 60 Minutes twice in the last 3 months, I think. It's been on the cover of Time magazine. It is really everywhere. Google uses, they have a meditation room. Tons of celebrities are now using it. Mainstream business, politicians. So it really is everywhere. How can it help? Well, I told you a little bit about how it has helped with me. It decreases stress, of course, because we're beginning to manage our brain. We're beginning to realize that our thoughts are just thoughts. They're not necessarily who we are or what we are, but just thoughts. And that we don't have to hang on to every one of them. We can let them go. We can experience them for what they are and then let them go. It allows us to enjoy life and be more present. If you are in the now and not in the past or the future, you will begin to enjoy life more. You may also begin to notice, sometimes I have the feeling that ignorance was bliss. You know, that those days before I discovered being introspective and kind of just living, kind of looking at the way my grandparents lived and my relatives, that ignorance is bliss. But it really isn't. The self-actualization and discovering how we really can become more. And what I really believe is that we are born perfect, and our conditioning kind of covers up our openness and our lovingness and our kindness, almost like an armor on our heart. And as we begin to do these practices and become more self-aware and practice mindfulness, it begins to kind of start chinking away at the armor and going back to who we were. And if you think about, you know, are you living what you thought your best you? I think once we start to begin to take away that armor, we are beginning to live that best you. It allows you to accept the good and the bad. And that's not something we do very well. We really are pleasure seekers as a society. We want everything that's good. Bring it on. More good. Yeah, I want that. I want that. And really trying to notice everything. To not only notice the bad, and if you just think about this, if 10 things happen in a day, 2 of them are bad, 8 of them are great. what two are you going to remember? You're going to remember the negative. And that's because our brain has been trained that way. Our brain is trained to be negative because of the way that we evolved. If you think of caveman times, they were in danger. They really did not need full access to their prefrontal cortex because they were in danger. If they went out of their cave, they could be attacked. They had to be on heightened alert. Even today, in some places where people may live, they are definitely more, active in their prefrontal, in their amygdala because of where they live, when they live in a dangerous place. We are fortunate to not live there. However, our emotions keep us in that place as if we are in danger. As if we walked out our front door, we would be attacked by a saber-toothed tiger. But we don't. So we need to start building that brain and the circuitry in the prefrontal cortex so that we start living the life that we were meant to lead and not being stuck as if we were cavemen to our emotions. And the way to do that is to practice being present and to become aware. So how about we do one more practice? Okay. This one we're going to do a body scan. Okay? And we're just going to work our way through our body. And even the kids can do this one for sure. We're going to do tensing and relaxing. Okay? So when I say what body part, you're going to tense that body part however best you can. Okay? And let's do it if you're comfortable with your eyes closed. I'm going to ring the bell. And I just want you to notice the sensations in your body. Because also the sensations give us information about what emotion is present. Okay. Okay, so practicing focused awareness, allowing your eyes to stay closed, and I want you to curl your toes and hold it for 5. Noticing your breathing and relax. Okay, I want you to next move up to your ankles. So you're going to flex your foot, whatever way you can to kind of get your ankle activated on both feet. You can push into the floor too. Hold it and breathe. Relax. Now moving up to your calf and flexing that calf muscle. Really flexing it. And relax. Moving up to your thigh. So really pushing those legs down into the floor and activating your thigh muscle. Notice if your kind of habit is to hold your breath. Really breathe. Allow yourself to just breathe. And relax. Now moving to your bottom, so where you're sitting, just kind of tighten. All the time remembering breathing. And letting go. Moving up to your hands, clenching your fist, so that your whole arm is activated. Noticing if this is a feeling you notice in everyday life. Pulling in your stomach as far as you can, and notice how hard it is to breathe. Don't hold your breath. Breathe in your nose still while holding in your stomach. And relax. Pulling your shoulders up to your ears. And relaxing. Lastly, and I promise 98% of your eyes are closed, your face. Scrunch your lips together, close your eyes, squeeze them, your cheeks. You're really making a silly face, but no one is looking. Breathing. Relaxing. And just taking 3 long, deep breaths before you open your eyes. So how often do we just allow ourselves to relax? The one thing I like about that exercise as a practice is it's hard to concentrate on anything else. So it's hard to have other things in your mind when you're doing those. So that's why I like that one as a beginner practice, because you really do have that ability to stay focused. Whereas if your beginner practice is just trying to sit silently, you feel bombarded by whatever thoughts are coming in, and often people get judgmental at that point, saying, I can't do this, my mind is crazy. So just allowing that, if you're interested in taking this further, for that to be your practice to begin with. So how was that relaxing and tensing? Isn't it like we really do get used to feeling tense? So that relaxing feels so good to just let go. But tense is a feeling that we really are in a lot. Like you can just realize when you're in the car, or like your shoulders, they're like up like this. It's like, oh, okay, bring them down. Moment of awareness. So mindfulness is that moment of noticing actually that we're not being mindful. That's mindfulness. So not, badgering yourself that you're not mindful, I'm so not mindful, I need to do this, I need to do that. But to begin to notice when you're not is the first time that you're being mindful. You are mindful when you notice that, because prior to that you weren't noticing. So that is being mindful. I have a quote, and then I want to read a poem. How am I doing on time? Okay. So here's a quote from Viktor Frankl. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our freedom to and power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and freedom. Mindfulness gives us the space. When you begin to practice being in the now, you have a thought. You don't go into reaction mode. So you have a thought and we react. That's our kind of normal way of handling situations. With mindfulness, you have a thought. You allow it space. And that space is breathing. Just coming into the moment and being able to say to yourself, okay, this is what I'm feeling right now. I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling threatened. I'm feeling worried. To be able to accept that as what you are feeling then allows you the choice to respond versus react and it be like this. You give yourself that gift of space. I'm going to read a poem to you guys. This is one of my favorite poems, and I don't know if I mentioned, but I was trained by Mindful Schools, which is a nonprofit out of Oakland, California. They've actually moved. They're now closer to San Francisco. But I've become a certified mindfulness teacher through them, and this is the first time that I heard this poem, and it really did resonate with me. So this poem is called An Autobiography in 5 Short Chapters, and it's by Portia Nelson. Chapter 1. Just an aside, it's also good because it's New Year's, so just kind of thinking in that with all our New Year's resolutions, if you have any. Chapter 1. I walk down the street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I am lost. I am hopeless. It isn't my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. Chapter 2. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place. But it isn't my fault. It still takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it there. I still fall in. It's a habit. But my eyes are open. I know where I am. It is my fault. I get out immediately. Chapter 4. I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Chapter 5. I walk down another street. That's a favorite of mine. So being able to think in your own life, what are your holes? Where are they? There are big ones, there are small ones. You know, what potholes need fixing immediately? And kind of looking at this as taking the small holes first, not jumping in. And that's often what New Year's resolutions have us do, is kind of jump into these huge holes, and then we fall short. But being able to look at the small potholes, those small holes that we're still falling into, that we, continually ask ourselves, here I am again. What am I doing here? The same thing keeps happening. Being able to look at those and say, can I look at this in the present moment, to not be influenced by all things of the past? And then fearful of things from the future. It's not an easy task, though. We have lots of conditioning. So I'm coming up on the end here. One of the tenets of mindfulness, as I mentioned, was beginner's mind. And beginner's mind is one of my favorites. It's the ability to see things as they are, to look at things as if you were a child again, without all that history, without the jadedness that we have. So when things present themselves, do we need to go back and say, oh, here we go again? To be able to say, okay, this is it happening right now. Do I need to respond in a way that my history says I need to respond? Or can I take this as something new, just for what it is today? The other thing about mindfulness that's so appealing is that, there are no experts, which I love, because that was one of my fears growing up and, struggling with learning and being able to have academic success. It was harder for me to not have to be the expert. Is liberating. It allows us freedom to make mistakes. And if we can do that, not only for ourselves, it frees up a lot of fear in ourselves if we can practice that, but to also practice that with kids, with children in school, for those people who are teachers here, to be able to bring that philosophy every day into the classroom. So on that note, I hope we can all leave here with maybe a little piece of beginner's mind going into the rest of our day and our week, having this be on a Sunday, and practicing acceptance for just what is going on right now. Allowing whatever it is that's happening, not necessarily meaning that, acceptance doesn't mean that you agree with it. Acceptance just means that you accept that it's happening in the now. You don't have to agree with whatever it is, but being able to accept that this is my present moment right now. And to not push it away, because when we push it away, it only gets bigger if it's an emotion, or it will just come back in some other fashion. But to be able to accept it and allow yourself to just sit with it for a minute, breathe, whatever it is. And to also practice this whole gratitude movement that's going. It's everywhere too, like mindfulness. But it's awesome. Like, that's the way to train your brain. You have to begin, if you don't want to focus on the negative and you want to start using the prefrontal cortex, you need to start noticing the positive so that new neural circuitry in the brain begins to connect when we use it for something different instead of being focused on that negativity that our brain is trained to do. We need to train it just like we go to the gym to work out our body. We need to train our mind to do the same and to begin to notice those 8 great things that happened and not focus on the 2 that weren't so great. Thank you.
Questions from the floor, and then after we do that a few minutes, we'll turn and share around the tables a little bit. So, Jackie, if you would be open to some questions.
Absolutely.
Maybe when someone asks, if you'd repeat it. So
sure. I'll do my best, yeah.
I have a question involving A and C. How does mindfulness affect aging, memory, and concentration?
It's right in there. I mean, mindfulness helps with memory. It's proven that it helps with memory. By what the prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain that working memory is associated with, executive function. So it really does build the neural circuitry, and it never is too late. So his question, if everybody heard it, was about mindfulness and aging.
Aging,
memory. Me too.
And concentration.
Oh, and concentration, yeah. So, I mean, if you just think about it, we really don't spend too much time on focusing, on purposeful focusing. We don't spend a lot of time doing that. We're very distracted. So the act of mindfulness and becoming aware, focused, present awareness, is much different than just paying attention. To bring that skill of focusing on one thing and giving all your attention to that one thing, not allowing the distractions to come in.
Well, are you telling me not to multitask?
I am. Yes. Yeah, multitasking, no matter how great we think we are at it, it's not what our brain was meant to do. We're meant to do one thing well at a time. Yeah.
I have a question about how, with the computer world, and so many of us are on computers, I feel that my brain is wanting quick changes. I'm getting more accustomed to, here, there, what's the next bit of information, and it's really frightening to me in a way. I mean,
Yeah.
it's harder to sit with a book and read or music.
Yeah.
I see somebody nodding and agreeing. I mean,
Yeah.
The pendulum swings. IBM just took one of our really good people from the Cancer Support Group. IBM hired her. Mindfulness.
Yeah.
That's what she does.
I mean, it really is epidemic. Distraction is epidemic. And thank you, Ken. We are really living in a world where if we don't begin to practice this focused awareness and controlling all the stimuli that comes into our life every day, we won't be able to focus. It's continuous. It really is continuous. And that's why this practice is even so much more important today, with cell phones, with Instagram, with all of these things. And you, Meg, you're experiencing this, and you are, grown up. What is it like for a child who doesn't know any different? Doesn't know, really has lived in an age of instant gratification. I've always said that, I loved waiting for The Wizard of Oz to come on once a year. That was so wonderful. Nothing like that occurs these days. Yeah.
On the topic, could you say more about incorporating mindfulness in the family setting with young children, and when can the youngest children start to benefit from or use mindfulness?
Well, I can tell you that I taught the program in the Montessori school in Drescher, and I taught 18 months old mindfulness. So they can begin to get little bits and pieces of it very young. There is informal practice and formal practice. Informal practice is the practice that we can do every day. Formal practice is the actual act of sitting, walking, or standing, doing the practice and practicing, kind of meditation. Mindfulness is the umbrella. So practicing mindfulness with kids is like being able to, at the dinner table, have 30 seconds before you start eating to just hold hands or be present. Mindfulness ties into prayer. It is very similar. Being able to sit in bed, and how we practice listening to sound before the kids go to bed. Just doing an exercise like that, listening to sound. For kids, it has to be fun. It's not like, you say, come on, let's sit and, do practice. Which they can do that too. But when they're little, it has to be, little fun activities that you make for them. You could do it in the car, mindful seeing. What can you really notice? Like we've driven this ride to school every day. What do you really notice today on your way to school? Mindful walking in nature. Really just bringing them into the present moment and having them focus and give time. It takes 30 seconds of sustained focus to make a neural connection. It's a long time. I've timed it in my office when I'm with people, and they're like, 30 seconds. So it just gives you an idea of how long it really takes to make a change in your brain and to bring that positivity to have it connect. You have to hold on to it. Yeah.
Do you have a suggested book for mindfulness?
Anything written by John Kabat-Zinn is Zinn. Yes, is wonderful. Mm-hmm. Zinn. There's also for parents, I would recommend, I'm doing a book club on mindful discipline. That's written by Sean Shapiro in my office, I think on the 27th of January, free book club. That's a great book for parents. It's bringing mindfulness into parenting. And also The Conscious Parent is a good one for parents by Dr. Sabery.
And CDs too, when you say, like, especially
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You can YouTube John Kabat-Zinn, all kinds of talks on there. There are really, there are a lot of players in the, Sharon Salzberg is another big one, Alicia Goldstein. They're all great. Yes?
I'm a teacher, and I was wondering, I teach very little children, first grade. I was wondering if there's a way, is there a book that I could buy that would help me begin to help children understand mindfulness and sort of start a year off properly so they can be more focused and
Yes. There are, Mind Up is one curriculum. That Mind Up. That's a really good one. It's one that's extensive. That is one sponsored by the Goldie Hawn Foundation. And she has another great book, 10 Minutes of Mindfulness, I think it is, or 10-minute, something like that. It's a blue cover. Really good, easy reading by Goldie Hawn. So yeah, really, she has been practicing this. She brought it into schools in California, I think 15 years ago. So that Mind Up is her curriculum, and it really does, there's applications for all, bringing it into all different kinds of subjects. Whereas the program that I teach is more of a experiential, I go in 20 minutes and teach kids and teacher together. Whereas that is an integration into the curriculum. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anybody else? And just for bringing it into your home, too, just going back, there's a really good CD called Sitting Still Like Frog, which is a CD and a book for kids where you can practice with them. That it's CD. It's, I think, at the most 10 minutes. Some of them are 5-minute, but really age-appropriate, fun little meditations with kids. Yes?
You mentioned that you were recently diagnosed with ADHD and your daughter who was as well. Seems like these days some doctors expect to write a prescription, to some stimulant to address that. Can you talk about your thoughts on that approach versus using mindfulness as a way to alleviate symptoms for children?
Yeah. I think for some kids it's necessary to have the medication as a helper. In my private practice, there are many kids who just cannot function or have a really hard time in school being able to gather their thoughts and even just sit still. And depending on what school they're in, some of them may need that little help of medication. I've not chosen it for my daughter. She isn't hyperactive. But I do go back and forth, and I have tried it for myself. And I go back and forth, too, with using it and not using. It is helpful, but there are side effects. So you have to weigh the pros and cons. The one thing, though, mindfulness is helpful for, I think, the best kind of recipe for success when it comes to ADD or ADHD is the combo of counseling and behavioral ADHD coaching, mindfulness. And then if that isn't working, then stepping it up and trying out the different medications. But I always go, or even going with nutritional supplements and vitamins. I've seen a big change in my daughter with omega-3s and really a high dose of those. Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Anybody else? Yeah.
Do you think sugar affects the mindfulness? Because my son-in-law is really functions from the reptile brain almost all the time, and he's addicted to sugar, so he eats that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And I see that starting to occur with his child. He's doing that to my grandson, that here, give him sugar, give him sugar.
Yeah, sugar.
I see a big difference in my grandson when he the AD or whatever, he's not paying attention, and then with the sugar, it's just impossible.
absolutely, because the sugar is an addiction.
Yeah,
And it,
does the sugar, does that actually, you mentioned about serotonin,
it increases dopamine and,
does it act that way?
yeah,
So,
absolutely. So it increases dopamine and serotonin, the sugar take. And it's so insatiable. They just want, and it's so easy. It becomes a really strong
they
habit.
stay stuck, right?
Yeah, yeah. So the mindful part of that is to become aware of how much sugar you're eating, and I actually just started doing this with my son because he really liked sugar. And I remember as a kid, they used to call me the yum yum queen because I loved, anytime someone would come to the house, I would expect them to have candy. And I see it in my son, and just beginning to measure the sugar of what you're eating every day. And time for kids, for educators in here, just had my 5th grader just had a article on sugar and what it does to your body. So they are bringing it about in school too. Definitely an addiction.
Let's thank Jackie again.